evening, and thank you for coming on this cold night. I appreciate it very much. Um, Last session was postponed because of the weather, and I hope you got all the information. I hope you didn't come in for nothing. And the weather was pretty bad, so I'm justifiably so they canceled. So the first session we talked about the discovery. The second session we talked about the people who lived up there. And today I'd like to with you some of the documentation that we found. Some of that is clear, others are obscure. We'll try to make the best of it. But just to refresh your memory, the scrolls were discovered in 1947. And the question is, who lived up there in the Dead Sea area? We don't have direct information. What we do have is the writings of the Jewish historian Josephus, a first century historian, and he tells us that around that time there were three major groups in ancient Judea. One of them were the Sadducees. The Sadducees represented the priests, the upper echelon of society. Then you had a group called the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the people at large, and eventually the Pharisees took over. The Sadducees disappeared when the temple was destroyed in the year 70. And then there is a small group of people called the Essenes. And we don't know who they are. When you compare the literature to what Josephus says about them, it is most likely that the people who lived up there were part of the Essenes. Things changed dramatically for them because, as you will see in a moment, we don't know if they were married or not married, yet they found women bones. And so we're not so sure. Maybe the movement went through a transition. And that's a problem that we're, but most scholars today think that we're dealing with a small group of people called the Essenes. In addition to all those, there were small, very small groups of people, including the new Christians, who were Jews, by the way. All the new Christians, at least those who we know as Christians, were born Jewish and died as Jews. So Christianity emerged later on when it moved to Rome. The first text that I have in front of you is a text entitled Damascus Document. This was first discovered by Solomon Schechter, the fellow who came from England to the Cairo Geniza, and he found a document that he called the Damascus Document. That he really called them the Zadokite document because Zadok is the name of the priest mentioned in the book. In addition to the Damascus document that was found in Cairo at the Geniza, at Qumran, they found 7 other manuscripts of the same book, which means that whoever was living up there in the mountains spent a great deal of time copying texts. And this is absolutely remarkable because they considered the text so important that they wanted to keep various copies. So they found 7 manuscripts of the same book in caves 4 and 6. What is remarkable about the Damascus document is that it's written in pure Hebrew. There is no Aramaic in the text. which is remarkable because Aramaic by that time started to creep in into the Jewish community. Daniel is written in Aramaic. Parts of Ezra is written in Aramaic. There is a sentence in Genesis in Aramaic, here and there, but the Damascus document doesn't have a single word in Aramaic. Whoever wrote the book up there, I presume, wrote it in pure Hebrew, even closer to the Mishnaic Hebrew. It contains two parts. Part one contains some exhortations of moral instruction, and the second part deals with specific laws. One thing that will come over and over again is that the text refers to the teacher of righteousness. No names. We don't have a single name. But the leader, that we presume was the leader of the community, is referred to as the teacher of righteousness. And the community itself refers itself as Yachad. Yachad has to do with unity, but also means a group. But that's how they call themselves, the Yachad. Who were these people? What were they doing up there? Don't ask, because we don't have any. So with that in mind, let's turn to the text, to the beginning of the text, and let's see if we can make any sense out of it. Do you all have, you don't need to share, we have plenty of text here.
Thank you.
Who needs a text? Yeah. Everybody, oh, all right. I'm going to read and make comments as I go along. It deals with a teacher of righteousness. And it says, in the era of anger, I don't know what that means. And I don't know to what is the author referring to. In the era of anger. That era of the 390 years when he, I presume is God, when he delivered them. You see, in Hebrew, there is no capital letter. So you don't know if he's referring to God or to an individual. But most likely, the reference is to God. When he delivered them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and that we know at some point Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judea, and later on Jews were allowed to return. So maybe the 390 years refers to the period of maybe the split of the kingdom when Judah and Israel split in the 6th century, right after Solomon, the king of Israel. Am I making sense to you? Solomon was a king of a major kingdom. But even in those days, there was a major difference between Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Those 12 tribes, they got together, but they never became one. Very soon after King Solomon, the northern tribes separated themselves from the south. So the northern tribes called themselves Israel, with Samaria as a capital, and the southern tribes, only 2 of them, 2.5 perhaps, remained in the south with the capital Jerusalem. The northern kingdom was destroyed very quickly after that, and all the tribes living in the north disappeared. Judah remained. So perhaps the reference is to that period between the split of the kingdom and the ascension of Nebuchadnezzar. A comment about numbers. Uh, don't take them literally in any text. When the Bible says 40 years, it doesn't mean 40, literally 39 plus 1. In the Bible, numbers are symbolic. 40 simply means a long time, and down to everything else. So you cannot rely on numbers when the Bible mentions a number for any people, anyone. So the text goes on. He took care of them. Presumably, God is taking care of the people and brought to blossom alike out of the priesthood and out of the laity that root. That root is in reference to the people of Judah. That root, which had been planted of old, allowing it once more to possess the land. In other words, the Judeans were able to keep the land, and to grow fat in the richness of its soil. Then they realized their iniquity and knew that they had been at fault. Obviously, for those of us who are reading this text for 2,000 years after, it doesn't mean anything. But for the insiders, it must have meant something. Otherwise, you wouldn't have written that. For 20 years, however, why 20, why 19? 20 it means for a period of time. However, they remain like blind men groping their way until at last God took of their deeds how they were seeking him sincerely, and that's a clincher. That's why the whole paragraph is written. And he raised up for them one who would teach the law correctly. The Hebrew is Moreh Tzedek. And that's the whole idea. The whole idea of this paragraph is to identify for us the rise of Moreh Tzedek, the teacher of righteousness. Would have been nice if they were to put his name at least. We would be able to place the historical name, but we don't know who the person was. To guide them, and by the way, this whoever Moreh Tzedek was, wielded tremendous power in the community. Tremendous power. To guide them in the way of his heart, and to demonstrate to future ages what he does to a generation that incurs his anger. So don't make God mad, because otherwise he'll get mad at you. That is, to the congregation of those that betray him and turn aside from his way. And this goes on and on and on in a very convoluted language. And we can't figure what this is all about, except to know that there must have been a teacher of righteousness who led the community, and the people need to obey by his sayings and deeds. Any comment? By the way, interrupt me, because I take this for granted. Yeah.
Was there one teacher of righteousness?
Yes.
One individual?
One individual.
It wasn't a title that passed on from one
Correct.
person to the
title passed on from one generation to another, but they didn't live that long.
So
They didn't say that.
There were serial teachers of righteousness.
Probably. My guess is that there was only one, maybe two, because the Romans came in and killed them all. So, and we don't know when the movement began to begin with. But it's always one. There is one leader. And he's not a king. He's not a prophet. He is a teacher of righteousness. And that's his title. That's his title. It's remarkable. Because we don't have anything parallel to that in the entire Jewish history. You know, rabbis are called rabbis, Talmid Chacham, Rav and all that. But no one's called Moreh Tzedek in Jewish history except for what we have at Qumran.
I had a question.
Yeah.
On the translation of the documents, is it done by a group or is it done by
it was
one
done by
person?
scholars. It was done by scholars. It's pretty reliable.
Yeah.
It's pretty reliable. Besides, the pure Hebrew. I mean, there are no unknown words there, so it's simple biblical Hebrew written even close to Mishnaic Hebrew. So there is no problem with the language. The problem is the content.
Right.
You can't figure that out. Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of the caves. How many caves are there?
Oh, 9 or 11 caves. So they were spread. They lived in caves.
Yeah.
They actually lived in caves because they were waiting for the Messiah. They were waiting for them to be king. And they were really waiting for Rome to be destroyed so that they can live freely in their place. That's what they were waiting. Now, when it comes to the laws, we find that they are much stricter than what the rabbis will do later on. Now, they must have had in the first century a series of rules and regulations about the holidays, the festivals, the Sabbath, and kosher meat and otherwise. But when you compare them, you will see they're extremely rigorous in what they do. Now, with regard to the Sabbath, first of all, about the origin of the Sabbath. We don't know where the Jews got this idea that they should rest one day a week. There is, in Babylonian literature, in Akkadian literature, the 15th day of the month, in the Babylonian calendar is called Shabbat. Shabbatu and Shabbat are the same word. Except that Shabbatum is on the 15th, and this is 7. Obviously, at some point, the Babylonians celebrated something during Shabbatum. When it came to the Jews, they changed the impact of the institution altogether. Why do we celebrate the Sabbath? We have no idea why we celebrate the Sabbath. The Ten Commandments gives us 2 reasons. You know, there are 2 sets of 10 Commandments, right? One is in Exodus, one is in Deuteronomy, and the 2 don't judge. They don't say the same thing. There's a major difference between the 2 of them, so, which begs the question, when Moses was up there, what did he get? He probably didn't get anything. These things were all attributed to him later on. So according to one of the texts, one of the set of the 10 Commandments, God created the world in 7 days and rested on 6 days and rested on the 7th. Okay, that's an explanation. Whether it's true or not, but I think when you come to Deuteronomy, you have the same commandment about the Sabbath, but you don't find an explanation. It says that you have to be nice to your children, and so and so, which is not an explanation at all. So we are totally in the dark as to why we celebrate Shabbat on the 7th day. The book of Deuteronomy talks about being slaves in the land of Egypt. What does it have to do with the 7-day rest? At some point, the Sabbath emerged within the Jewish community. Jews decided that it would be set aside for some sacred purposes, and slowly but surely, an institution developed out of that custom. For many years, Jews in Israel kept the Sabbath on the 7th day. So did the new Christians, who celebrated the Sabbath as a sacred day. But when Christianity moved from Israel to Rome, they accepted the Roman day of rest, which was Sunday. And that's why Christians celebrate Sunday instead of Saturday, because it represents a transition from one area in Judah to the Roman environment, which had a totally different set of beliefs and practices. All right, now here, look at how the people up there are supposed to celebrate the Sabbath. On the Sabbath day, no one is to indulge in revolt, debauchery, the vulgar speech, that's what it means, or empty talk. Can you imagine Jews not talking? You can have empty talk. So what is empty talk to begin with? My guess is that you cannot gossip. No gossiping. Or something like that. Well, I don't understand what empty talk means. No one is to claim repayment of debts. All right, so you cannot go and claim you owe me $10. You can't do that. No one is to engage in lawsuits concerning property and gain. All right, that I understand. No one is to talk about labor or work to be done the next day. You cannot even talk about it, that the plumber will come tomorrow. Well, there was no plumber in those days. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. No one is to go out into the field while it is still Sabbath with the intention of resuming his work immediately the Sabbath ends. So I'm asking, what did they do all day long on the Sabbath? Took a nap. That's the only thing you can do. Sleep. Go to services probably if they have any services, and then you took a nap and you didn't do anything. No one is to walk more than 1,000 cubits. 1,000 cubits is about a quarter of a mile outside the city. What do Jews do in modern times to cover that? Have you ever heard of the institution called Eru?
Yeah.
According to rabbinic law, you're not allowed to carry anything on the Sabbath. But if you can set aside an area and consider that as if it were your house, you can carry it from one bedroom to the other. So the rabbi very cleverly came up with the concept of Eru, enlarging the sphere from your house to an entire town. Somebody told me that the entire town of Brooklyn is now an Eru. And how do they do that? They do that by connecting all the telephone poles with wires. The entire town of Brooklyn is covered like that, so that that allows you to carry things from one part of Brooklyn to another, because it's as if it were my home. It's obviously legal fiction, but you can get around that. Rabbis realize that you can't restrict yourself to that, but not here. You can't do that. They did not recognize any concept of a rule. No one is to eat on the Sabbath day anything that has not been prepared in advance. That we already know. You're not allowed to cook. So what do Jews do, to have a hot meal on the Sabbath? Cholent, right? You prepare everything on Friday and you keep it burning all day long, and this way you have something hot to eat. He is not to eat anything that happens to be lying about in the field, neither is he to drink of anything that was not previously in the camp. If, however, he is traveling, he may go down to bathe and may drink wherever he happens to be. As you can see, very strict. I don't think you can live that kind of life. unless you are in the cave and there's nothing to do to begin with. Right? But very, very strict in their observance of the Sabbath. Simply because the Bible said you have to rest. The question is, what does it mean to rest? So these are the laws that they came up with. And by the way, it goes on and on and on. It's impossible to live like this. Here is something, the rules about kashrut. By the way, here's another problem that we have. The Bible tells us, eat this, don't eat this. Eat this, don't eat that. But it never tells us why not. And don't tell me it has to do with cleanliness and all that. It's not absolutely. And that concept, that did not exist in biblical times. We don't know why. We don't know why. We don't know why Jews are not allowed to eat lobster. What's wrong with the lobster? What's that?
They didn't have them.
Well, yeah, probably they didn't. What shellfish? I mean, what is the rationale? No rationale. It's something you do this, you do, and that became part of Jewish life. In my practice, I can tell you, I come from Turkey, Muslim country, and Jewish home, and all that. I eat shellfish with no sense of guilt, and I cannot eat pork. I cannot eat pork. If you ask me why, I can't defend myself. There is no rationale. What's that?
That's typical.
Yeah.
It's just something
Yeah,
innate.
I'm the same
I
way.
know. I
Wasn't it
just
because
can't.
of trichinosis?
Nah, they didn't know anything about it.
Well, they may not have had a name for it, but
In those days, they didn't know anything about the medications or disease and all that.
no, but they,
At some point, somebody must have said, "This is you eat this, you don't eat that." And that's the end of it. Why the rationale? I don't know. And I have a problem because I live in the Willows across the street. So sometimes they bring meat. So I have to ask all the time, does this contain pork? They already know me. Rabbi, this is not for you. And this is for you. That you can eat because this one doesn't have pork. That's not. But I can't justify it. Now, why? Why I ask myself, why can I eat shellfish, shrimp, okay, but not pork? I guess because in Turkey, Muslim country, nobody eats pork either. So it became culturally bound limitations.
Cheese and meat.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know why.
Because it's not halal.
What?
You won't eat pork because it's not halal.
Correct. And I learned something new at the Willows. We have a young woman who's a server, and she covers her face. So I immediately took it that she is a Muslim. And I said, "Are you from Malaysia?" "Yeah, I'm from Malaysia." And she covers herself. And I said, "Do you eat here?" "Oh no," she said, "I can't eat here." "Why?" "Because the meat is not halal. The meat is not halal." "Well," I said, "I'm a rabbi. You eat kosher food?" "Oh yeah," he said, "kosher food I eat, but this meat I don't." Don't figure out. There's no justification for that. She would not eat the meat there, but she would eat something that a Jew would kill, and that's okay for her. Yeah.
I actually have a friend who was the administrator of a Jewish nursing home, kosher nursing home
Yeah.
in southern New Jersey.
Yeah.
And basically they kept the nursing home afloat because their kitchen is providing food to the New Jersey prison system for the Muslim prisoners.
Absolutely.
From a kosher kitchen.
That's a fantastic. That's correct. Muslims will only eat. They hate us, but they will only eat the food that we prepare. Most of them, not all, obviously. Okay, here is something about food. Now, he's going to talk about bees in a moment. Is honey kosher? Honey is kosher.
Well, yeah, presumably, I mean, like when God,
talked about, like Israel, he advertised it as a land of milk and honey.
Correct. Honey is kosher, but bees are not. There is no rhyme or reason for that. Oh, the rabbi said that they can justify it because it doesn't come from the inside. It comes from nonsense. I mean, there is no justification for that. So here are some of the rules regarding food. No one is to defile. By the way, I want you to know that I became a shochet in my youth, and here is a story about my experience as a shochet. In Istanbul at that time, they needed some people to slaughter chickens. So I was at the religious school and yeshiva. So my teacher said, "I want you to become a shofar." I said, "Okay, I'll learn how to do it." So I took lessons. And the most important thing I learned was how to make sure that the knife does not have a pegima, does not have a nick, because if it has a nick, it's not kosher, right? So it has to be perfectly sharp. So after I learned the lessons and all that, so they sent me to the place to slaughter chicken. I had to slaughter 30 chickens to show that I had an experience. So I took the first chicken in my hand. I still remember it. I held the head with these two fingers. This one, I put the leg here. So the chicken lying down like this. So what I was supposed to do is give him a good cut, one swoop, and the chicken is dead. But I nicked the guy. So he flew out of my hand. So you can imagine 20 people in the area following the poor chicken to put him out of his misery. Finally, one of the guys caught him and cut his head. Obviously, that's not kosher. But from then on, I learned how to apply a little bit of pressure. So I go before the chief rabbi to take my exam. He says, "Turn around." I said, "Okay," I turn around. He took my knife, so he knocked on the table 3 times. Said, "How many pekimot can you find on the knife?" So I'm going with my nail, going up and down, sharp. Then I heard 3. Said, "No pekimot, you passed it." What did he do? He turned the knife around to trick me, to see if he was. So I'm about to come to the States. I'm packing. So I found my knife. By the way, I never practiced. So I found my knife. I asked myself, how am I going to explain this to the custom officials that I'm traveling with a nice, sharp knife? And that was the end. That was the end of it. I threw it away. I never practiced and never dealt with that again. All right. So, no one is to defile his person by eating an unclean animal or reptile. It's by definition, the rabbis identify what is clean, what is not clean. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the animal's cleanliness or not. It's ritually clean or not clean. This rule includes the larvae of bees and any living entity that creeps in water. Fish are not to be eaten unless they are ripped open while still alive. That's very strict. And their blood poured out. I never knew that fish had blood. What's that?
Presumably they have blood.
I don't know what they mean by blood there. As for the various kinds of locusts, by the way, locust is a kosher. If you want to eat locusts, the rabbis say it's kosher. You can eat kosher. So these are to be put in fire or water while they are still alive, for that is what their nature demands. Obviously, they must have observed certain animals, and it goes on and on and on. in a very strict way to accept or to reject what you're allowed to eat, what you're not allowed to. The next text is entitled, "This is Rules for an Assembly of the Congregation," and makes a very clear distinction between those who are priests and those who are not. There's no doubt in my mind that in that group, the priests represented the higher echelons. They were the leaders of the community. And by the way, they are the Aaronites, the followers of Aaron. Aaron is at the top, the Levites in the middle, and the Israelites are at the bottom. And the question becomes complicated because in the book of Deuteronomy, the Levites are at the top, whereas in the book of Exodus, Leviticus, and the others, the Aaronites are at the top, which means that at some point there was a struggle within the community, and some priests became more powerful than the others. Whether they were the Levites or the Aaronites, we do not know. Eventually, we know the Aaronites became the priests, and the Levites became their assistant. But that was not always the case, evidenced by what we find in the book of Deuteronomy. Here is the way they see themselves in the community, very and stratigraphy very clearly. Who is at the top, who is at the bottom, and those who are at the bottom have to respect those who are at the top. Each man, and by the way, as you can see, men, right? No women. Each man shall sit in his place, which means that they had assigned seating when the assembly got together. The priest shall sit first, and the elder second, and all the rest of the people according to their rank. And by the way, there's the same thing happened with the rabbis got together too, the rabbinic assembly. The older rabbis sat in front, the newer rabbis sat in the middle, and the youngest ones sat. And the famous rabbinic saying is that it is better for someone to tell you come up than for them to tell you to go down. And that's a message I practiced when I decided to retire. I said to myself, I don't want anybody to tell me, Rabbi, it's about time. Maybe it's about time you ought to consider retiring. And I always remember that rabbinic saying, better for people to tell you go up than for people to tell you go down. Okay. And thus shall they be questioned concerning the law. Obviously, the ones in the front are questioned first. And concerning any counsel or matter coming before the congregation, each man bringing his knowledge to the council of the community. I'm sure you realize that when you get together as a group or so, certain people always sit in the same place, right? Custom. At our place at the Willows, every Friday at 4 o'clock, we have a cocktail. And before that, they set up chairs, and we have a fellow who plays the piano, and they sing songs all the way from the Second World War. I don't think we've come after 1950. It's always 1945. All the good songs are the best, right? What I want to say is that they set the tables and the chairs in the morning. Some lady, mostly I know a couple of ladies I know, get there an hour before to claim their seats. God forbid somebody else goes and takes that seat. Don't you do the same thing in the synagogue as well? You always sit on the second row, the second line. I think we are all habit. It's a matter of habit. We're students of habit. We always like to do the same thing. Always. At the university, I tell my students, I recognize the faces. I may not know the name because I have 36 students, but I want you to sit in the same place every time, so I know who is here and who is not. And that's the same thing. People sat in the same place all the time. Here you go. No man shall interrupt a companion before his speech has ended. Wouldn't that be nice to apply this to all the board meetings and all that? Nor speak before a man of higher rank. Each man shall speak in his turn. And in an assembly of the congregation, no man shall speak without the consent of the congregation, nor indeed of the guardian of the congregation, which shows that they also have a guardian of the congregation who monitor the procedures. Should any man wish to speak to the congregation, yet not be in a position to question the counsel of the community, let him rise to his feet and say, I have something to say to the congregation. It's not, have you ever seen how the British Parliament functions? If you want to speak, you have to stand up and they recognize you. It's the same thing. I guess the British, what's that?
Like Robert's rule.
Robert's rule, right, yeah, right.
Yeah, they have some,
What's that?
they have some kind of weird rules in Parliament sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not too far away from here. Let him rise to his feet and say, I have something to say to the congregation. If they command him to speak, he shall speak. And it goes on and on and on to identify what is the procedure when the community gets together for a discussion. The next text is entitled The Rule of the Congregation. Again, they were expecting someone as a Messiah to come and save them. It has to do with the end of time. In Jewish life, the idea of the Messiah is a very late concept. We don't have anyone who claimed to be the Messiah in the early period of biblical time. The concept of Messiah emerged when things were really bad, and people were looking for anyone to come in and save them from their misery. And in the first century, as you know, all kinds of people started to claim they were messiahs. And in the Jewish community, we've had a number of false messiahs. Do you remember any false messiah in Judaism? Any name? Does the name Sabtai Tzvi mean anything to you? Sabtai Tzvi? Sabtai Tzvi was a Jewish guy, a rabbi, who lived in Izmir in the 16th century. And he really, not him, but another rabbi identified him as a long-awaited Messiah. And he created a whole movement called the Sabbatean movement.
Wasn't he the guy that converted to being Muslim because so he wouldn't die?
He converted to Islam. When things got out of hand, when they put him in prison, and about 1 million Jews were coming to visit him every day to get his blessings and all that. Finally, the Ottoman Empire brought him to court, and they gave him an option. You can prove you're the Messiah if we can shoot an arrow across your chest. If you survive, you're the Messiah. If not, you're dead. And the guy was clever enough. He said, do I have a second choice? Yeah, you can become a Muslim and save your neck. So he became a Muslim on the spot. You can imagine how this felt in the Jewish community, who considered him the long-awaited Messiah. And so we've had a number of rabbis, a number of Jews who declared themselves Messiah. If we have time, we'll read one at the end of the session with Bar Kokhba. He also declared himself Messiah. But there were others as well, so we're not so pure in that respect. The more the Jewish community was suffering, the more likely it was that they were expecting somebody to come in and save them. Someone, anyone, to come and save them. So, yes.
Does that include Jesus?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Jesus was a nice Jewish boy. I tell everybody. He didn't do anything.
Even
We
declared
know
himself.
very little about Jesus. The one who made him what he was Paul. Now that is the genius of Christianity.
Yes.
He was. The same thing, Titus said he was a poor rabbi, not too intelligent. But there was another rabbi who promoted him. And he saw in him, well, they were Kabbalists anyway, they saw in him a certain light, divine light, and he started to spread the name around and so on and so forth. That's why he became so big. Jesus did the same thing. Paul is the one who made Jesus who he was. We know almost nothing about Jesus.
Rabbi
Everything
Schneerson,
is attributed to him. By the way, he's not the only one. We don't know anything about others either in the Bible. You name me one person about whom we have a definite information. Maybe David. That he was a real guy. Why? Because they found a document that talks about the house of David. If there was a house of David, there must have been a David. But that's that. Otherwise, there's no way to corroborate. The majority of personalities in the Bible cannot be verifiable.
I think they once found like an inscription in Jerusalem which mentions an event which happens essentially with something that's ordered by one of the kings of Israel.
Yes,
Hezekiah,
the
I think.
Hezekiah is mentioned in one of the texts. But that's late, that's really late. But in the early period, Moses, Joshua, and not to mention Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are all legendary figures. We're not dealing with any history there. The first reference to Israel occurs in the Merneptah Stele that says Israel is no more. That's 1207, which means that in the 13th century, there must have been a group that identified itself as Israelites, and there was a battle, and they were defeated. That's the first time we hear the 1200s. And then what happened to all of that before? Just legends that were repeated from generation to generation, but we're not dealing with history here. We're dealing with nice legends and nice stories. Okay, I'm digressing. Okay, so the same thing about the Messiah. They're expecting somebody who's going to save them. And now, this text tells you what is their educational system in those days. And this is the rule for all the host of the congregation for every man born in Israel. From his youth, they shall instruct him in the book of meditation. They have no idea what that is. In Hebrew, is Hagi. We don't know what this book is. And shall teach him according to his age the precepts of the covenant. He shall be educated in their statutes for 10 years. So he starts maybe at the age of 5, 6, and he studies for 10 years. Then, at the age of 20 years, he shall be enrolled that he may enter upon his allotted duties in the midst of his family and be joined to the holy congregation. He shall not approach a woman to know her, in other words, to have sex with her, by lying with her before he is fully 25 years old. So no sex before 25, and the marriage age is set at the age of 25.
25 or 20?
20, I'm sorry. 20 years old, right, 20. 25 is later on. So people got married at the age of 20. My impression that this is too late. In those days, most people got married, the woman maybe at the age of 16, 17, they were married, and the boys by the age of 17, 18, they were married. They didn't live that long. By the age of 40, 45, they were dead. And they didn't have medicine. They didn't know how to deal with diseases. So they were married when they were very young, and they had children right away because they never knew what was going to happen. By the way, that's the practice among Muslims as well. Did you read in the paper that a fellow from Saudi Arabia paid, was that Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan, paid 500 cows and a piece of land or so to marry his 9th wife at the age of 13. The woman was the age of 13. Now, Muslim, how many women can a Muslim marry? 4. Up to 4. You can only marry up to 4.
At the same time.
At the same time, right. So what happens if you want to marry another one? Yeah, you divorce her. And how is that divorce? All you have to do is appear before a judge, and you tell the judge in front of her, you say, talak, 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 and she's out. Talak means divorce in Arabic. Talak, 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 she's out. You can marry another one, no problem. That's why many people in Saudi Arabia keep marrying them, because they can afford 500 cows. What's 500 cows for somebody who owns millions of dollars, right? Well, do we have any limits in Jewish life? No. You can marry as many women as you can afford to buy, and you're actually buying.
Yeah, I mean Solomon apparently
Oh,
had
900.
like 700.
Yeah.
Yes.
That means he had many wives.
Yeah.
Don't take it literally.
Of course
Don't
not.
take it literally.
Can I ask,
It's just
Yeah.
not-
so they were living in their caves when they're talking about an assembly of the congregation. Did they have a temple, or are they referring back to Israel?
Oh, no, there's no temple.
Okay, so,
No.
all right.
The temple is in the hands of the Sadducees.
So they're writing rules for a broader group, not just themselves.
Correct. They are in the mountains there, imagining that one day they'll be able to go back and take over the temple, whatever. But they know that the Sadducees are running the temple, and they were kicked out, or they decided to move out voluntarily because they couldn't live with the Sadducees. See, that's the problem. Talks about women. Were they married up there? We don't know if they were married or not, because we have a number of texts that says that you cannot be part of the congregation if you're married. Is it possible that the group went through a period of transition, married at one point, but then they said no more? It's like the Catholic priest today. You cannot marry. But if you're a deacon, you can. So it depends on your status within the church. So we go. At the age of 25 years, he may take his place among the foundation, namely the lower ranks of the community, to work in the service of the congregation. At the age of 30 years, he may approach to participate in lawsuits and judgments, and may take his place among the chiefs of the thousands of Israel, the chiefs of the hundreds, 50s, and 10s, the judges and the officers of the tribes in all their families, under the authority of the sons of Aaron the priest. Here again, he still imagined that one day they're going to have a priest. And every head of the family in the congregation who is chosen to hold office, to go and come before the congregation, shall strengthen his loins, that he may perform his tasks among the brethren in accordance with his understanding and the perfection of the way. According to whether this is a great or little, so shall one man be honored more than another. When a man is advanced in years, and by that I presume he means 6 years old at most, he shall be given a duty in the service of the congregation in proportion to his strength. Now, there's a caveat. No simpleton shall be chosen to hold office in the congregation of Israel with regard to lawsuits or judgments, nor carry any responsibility in the congregation, nor shall he hold any office in the war destined to vanquish the nations. They're grandiose ideas. They're going to vanquish the community, the whole world, and it's not real. His family shall merely inscribe him in the army register and shall do his service in proportion to his capacity. Now he talks about the priests. The sons of Levi shall hold office, each in his place, under the authority of the sons of Aaron. See, you can see the end of the biblical period, the Aaronites ruled, the Levites second. And this is reflective in what happened with the Sadducees as well, because the Sadducees were Aaronites. They shall cause all the congregation to go and come, each man in his rank, under the direction of the heads of the family of the congregation, the leaders, judges, and officers, according to the number of all their host, under the authority of the sons of Zadok the priest, which means that they had a Moreh Tzedek, a leader of the community, and they had somebody called Zadok the priest, the sons of Zadok, which they probably were Aaronites, and under the direction of all the heads of family of the congregation. Now you have a sense of how structured the community was living up in the mountains. The next text is called Beatitudes. In Hebrew, the word is Ashrei. You know, in Hebrew, we have a number of psalms that have Ashrei, 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 Techa, and all that. And here is one that was written in magnificent Hebrew. Magnificent Hebrew. They all start with Ashrei. By the way, Ashrei does not mean blessed. Ashrei in Hebrew means fortunate is he, or something like that. Fortunate is he. Lucky is he, not blessed. Blessed is a different Hebrew word. But that's the way they translate it here. I don't like the translation. Blessed is he who walks with a pure heart and who doesn't slander with his tongue. Blessed are they who hold fast to her laws. Her meaning wisdom. They're talking about wisdom. And wisdom in Hebrew is feminine. And do not hold to the ways of evil. Blessed are they who rejoice in her and do not overflow with the ways of folly. What a beautiful text. Blessed are they who ask for her with clean hands and do not seek her with a deceitful heart. Blessed is the man who grasps hold of wisdom and walks in the Torah of the Most High and directs his heart to her ways and restrains himself with her disciplines and always accepts her chastisement and doesn't cast her off in the misery of his afflictions, nor forsake her in a time of trouble, nor forget her in days of terror. Again, they're talking about how important it is to pursue wisdom. And in the meekness of his soul, doesn't despise her, but rather always meditates on her, and when in affliction, occupies with himself with God's Torah. And here, obviously, there was an erasure. Somebody filled in these words with God's Torah, who all his life meditates on her and places her continually before his among kings. As you can see, all kinds of very diverse type of literature. And there are copies and copies and copies of the same text. They must have considered these texts so special, perhaps sacred, that that's what they did all day long. They copied the text. which shows that Jews in the first century had high respect for the word, especially word that was considered to be sacred or special in the eyes of the community. And that's why even today we take the Torah very seriously, even though we know it's not. It contains mistakes. It contains other historical uh, inadequacies and all that. But that's what we've been given, and we transmit it from generation to generation because we consider it to be as a special document that we've inherited. When I was in a counselor in camp one day, I was head of the unit. One of the art teachers comes to see me. The rabbi said, I noticed that in the Torah that we have, there is an erasure there. Erasure is something missing there. So I put together a nice team, she says to me. A couple of kids from camp were going to paint it and fill it. I said, absolutely not. You can't touch this. This is not something that you do an art project. You fill in the gap here. You got to have somebody who knows, a scribe, to come in, and you don't simply paint this over like that. No. I probably overreacted, but that's a good Jewish way of reacting. We take the text very seriously with all of its limitations and all that. So, and here you have it. Okay. I'm at the end of my hour. I have one more page dealing with Bar Kokhba. Are you up to staying for another 10 minutes or so?
Yeah.
Okay. You have the text before Bar Kokhba in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. There were a number of revolts against Rome. By the way, they found Bar Kokhba's text in Wadi Murabbaat in the Dead Sea area. They found quite a few copies of that. There was a fellow by the name of Shimon Bar Kokhba, who was the head of the rebels, and I think the year 130 something, 132 BCE or so. There was a rebellion against, and Bar Kokhba was the leader, the military leader of the time. He was considered to be a charismatic personality, to the point that Rabbi Akiva, who lived during his time, 2nd century CE, considered him as the long-awaited Messiah. And what happened is that at Wadi Murabbaat, they discovered his letters. That's what I found remarkable. So we're dealing with a real person, military leader, who unfortunately lost to the Romans, and he was killed by the Romans. And by the way, the same thing happened with all the Jews who lived in Qumran too. The Romans came in and killed them all. What happened to Masada? In Masada, they didn't wait for the Romans to come and kill them. They killed themselves. So Masada is a very problematic point in Jewish history, because according to Jewish law, you cannot commit suicide. You're not allowed to commit suicide. And here we have a group of 900 people who committed suicide rather than fall in the hands of the Romans. So I have very mixed feelings about Masada. And what happens in the Israeli army today? When new inductees come in, they take them all to Masada, and they swear that we will not do what they did. We will not fall by our hands. We will defend ourselves to the end, but we will not kill ourselves. So they turn Masada upside down. Here you have a real person. Here's a text from the Talmud, Sanhedrin, 93b. They call him Bar Kosiba. We don't know his real name. Was that Bar Kokhba? Bar Kokhba sounded like a Hebrew word of another real name that was Bar Kosiba. Bar Kosiba reigned 2.5 years and then said to the rabbis, I am the Messiah. Wow. He came out and declared himself Messiah. They answered, Of the Messiah, it is written that he smells and judges. In other words, that means that he has a sense of justice, that he can act as a judge. That's what it means. The text comes from Isaiah. Let us see whether he, Bar Koziba, can do so. When they saw that he was unable to judge by the scent, they slew him. They slew, Jews killed him. In reality, we don't know how Bar Kokhba died. From what we know, I think he died at the hands of the Romans, but that's not what the Talmud says. Who knows what the truth is? And here are from the letters that he was sent. By the way, in those days, that was the only way to communicate. They would write on either on parchment or on a piece of stone. He would carve, and he would send somebody on horseback, and they would take messages from one place to the other. Here's the first letter. Shimon bar Kosiba to Yehonatan and to Masabala. We don't know who these are, but maybe military commanders down the valley. Let all the men from Tekoa is in Judea, and other places who are with you, be sent to me without delay. And if you shall not send them, let it be known to you that you will be punished. So very strict military commander, Bar Kokhba. Second letter. Letter of Shimon bar Kosiba to Yehonatan, son of Baayan. We don't know if it's the same guy or not. Peace. My order is that whatever Elisha tells you, do to him and help him and those with him be well. Obviously, we don't know what this is, but obviously they knew what the message was and say, obey what they tell you. Third letter. Shimon, again, Shimon bar Kosiba, to Yehuda bar Menashe in Kiryat Arbaya, it's close to Hebron. I have sent to you 2 donkeys. Now we know how they communicated, not by horses, but really by donkeys. I sent you 2 donkeys, and you must send them with them 2 men to Yehonadan, son of the Ayan, and to Masavala, the 2 guys that we saw above, the military commanders, in order that they shall pack and send to the camp towards you palm branches and citrons. It looks like they're getting ready for Sukkot. So he needs palm branches and willows. See that they are tithed. He was observant, ritually observant. He had to be tithed. And send them to the camp. The request is made because the army is big. Be well. Be well is shalom. Shalom. Right? So the community, the soldiers up there are about to celebrate Sukkot, and he needs a lulav and etrog. So he said, give him an etrog. Make sure that that's pure and clean, and send them to me. The fourth letter. From Shimon bar Kosiba to the men of En Gedi. These are by the real letters that they found. We're talking a real person. To Masabala and to Yonatan bar Ya'an. Peace. It's the same guy. Now he's criticizing him. In comfort you sit, eat and drink from the property of the house of Israel, and care nothing for your brothers. Wow. Strong. Now, here is a statement from Rabbi Akiva regarding Bar Kokhba. And that's, again, taken from the Talmud. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught, my teacher Akiva used to expound, a star goes out from Jacob. He interpreted that, Kosiba goes out from Jacob. When Rabbi Akiva saw Bar Kosiba, he said, this is the King Messiah. Rabbi Jonathan ben Torta said to him, Akiva, grass will come between your 2 cheeks, and still the son of David will not have come. Very realistic. Very realistic. One rabbi criticizing the leading rabbi of the time, Akiva, who took Bar Koziba as a long-awaited Messiah, and the other rabbi said, be realistic. This guy is no Messiah. And throughout Jewish history, we've had a number of them, as I told you before, who declare themselves Messiah, and some poor Jews accepted them and took them for the long-awaited Messiah. Others in the Jewish community are more realistic and say the concept of Messiah is something that we hope something good will happen in the future. We're not dealing with a real person. We're not dealing with a person. And then what is the idea in Christianity? That Jesus was a Messiah, but he's going to come back, right? But in Judaism, the Messiah is something at the end. What did we do in Reformed Judaism? We don't even talk about the Messiah anymore. What do we talk about? We talk about the Messianic age. That's a nice way of saying we hope something good will happen at the end of time. But don't waste your time with that. Do your work now here and wait until the good times roll.
Thank you.
So now you have, what did we learn? We learned a lot of things. The first century was a very tumultuous time in Jewish history. The Romans are oppressing, and the Jews had to find a way to define themselves against the Romans. The Christian community is creating problems for the Jews. There are other forces in the area. It was a very tumultuous time. And then, thank God, eventually things took shape. The rabbis took hold. The temple was destroyed by the Romans. The Sadducees disappeared. The Pharisees eventually gave rise to the rabbi, and the new generation of Jews emerged out of that, which was radically different from the biblical times. Rabbinic Judaism is based on the Bible, but it turned the Bible upside down to create a new lifestyle for the Jews in the first and second century. And that's what we do in Jewish history all the time. We always try to adapt Judaism to the needs of the time, because if this is not done, Judaism will disappear, and that's not what we want to happen. And that's why Reformed Judaism, I think, is a good answer to the needs of our time. Is it perfect? No, but we're doing much better than other movements that are either shrinking or attracting only the very the fundamentalists, the very limited people who want something very clear, and in reality, nothing is so cut and paste in real life. So we've got to be able to adapt Judaism always to the needs of the time, and that's how we're going to survive. And I hope that's the case. Well, thank you very much for coming. Any questions? I created a lot of problems for you, so
It's okay.
I think I can answer some questions.
Thank you.
If you have some questions for me.
Any questions?
So they had lawsuits.
The lawsuits, yeah, they had lawsuits, right? And they had courts.
Yeah.
Oh, they brought people before courts. They judged people. Oh, yeah, a very structured community. More than I.
Basis of our legal system.
What's that? Oh, yeah. More than what I like, but I found this group, they couldn't sustain themselves with that kind of rigidity. There's no way.
That's the,
Watching us live.
Oh.
I don't know if either Ellen or Carol.
Oh, if they have questions, I'll be happy to answer.
And most of the hand memory are on.
Perfect.
Okay, all right, thank you and good night.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
this is the source of the word for ascetic, right?
What's that?
The word ascetic
Said it.
derived from
Right.